Putin thinks he's about to outfox the U.S. on Ukraine peace negotiations. Will Washington let him? Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to better navigate these turbulent times. Under U.S. pressure, Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire if Russia also accepts. Kyiv did so without getting firm security guarantees from the U.S. or Europe. Putin is now licking his chops. He thinks he's on his way to achieving his three-pronged goal of 1. Effectively controlling the countries that had been part of the Soviet Union, 2. Reasserting Russian dominance of Central and Eastern Europe that had existed during the Cold War, and 3. Destroying NATO, which would diminish, if not destroy, U.S. power in Western Europe. Among other things, such an outcome would seriously damage the U.S. economy. Concerning negotiations about the Ukraine war, Putin will start with a classic reluctant bride game. What concessions will he get to agree to come to the bargaining table? The demands are no secret. Among them, a new Ukrainian government, no European troops in Ukraine to secure the country's genuine independence, the reduction or elimination of U.S. and NATO military assistance, immediate recognition of Russian sovereignty over 4 provinces in eastern Ukraine and the Crimea. Even if Russia agrees to a ceasefire, Putin will do what he's always done: have his troops attack any openings they see in the front lines and then blame Ukraine for the fighting. Putin will never go for a deal that leaves Ukraine a genuinely strong and independent nation with credible guarantees of its security. He wants a disguised surrender. Putin believes the U.S. is so eager for a deal that Washington will force Kyiv to accede to a virtual capitulation, by Washington doing again what it did just before that ceasefire agreement: cut off military and battlefield intelligence for Ukraine. Europe can't make up the gap, and Washington might threaten tariffs if it did. Putin's war has been a disaster, and Russia has serious manpower problems. But Putin has always fortified himself by the conviction that the U.S. and Europe would tire of the contest and go for a slow-motion retreat. It doesn't help when Secretary of State Marco Rubio tries to make nice to the Russians by saying things like, the U.S. doesn't want to be abrasive. Meantime, Putin has been getting increasingly generous assistance. China has been supplying critical parts for aircraft and other weapon systems. Iran and North Korea have been sending armaments, especially drones. Pyongyang, of course, is also supplying thousands of mercenaries. The government, by the way, gets the money, not the soldiers, as battlefield fodder. The idea that appeasing Putin at the expense of Ukraine will have Putin abandoning his alliance with China, just like Beijing did with Moscow during the Cold War, is a delusion. Back in the late 1960s, the U.S. and China had a common adversary, the Soviet Union. In fact, Moscow came close to going to war with Beijing in 1969. That's not the situation today. So, what should the U.S. do with Putin? Send Ukraine a slew of A-10 Warthogs that would devastate Russian ground armor and tanks, as well as other needed weapons in meaningful quantities. Remove any Biden-era restrictions on targets inside Russia. Putin will then realize his current assumption of a Washington-engineered surrender by Ukraine is an illusion, and then we'll get fruitful negotiations. I'm Steve Forbes. Thanks for listening. Do send in your comments and suggestions, and look forward to being with you soon again.